Shall I take us through the Suns?
Bring it.
All right. So key free agents, maybe you've heard Chris Paul, which is not as
But
simple as just being a free agent.
we'll get
Um,
into it.
yeah. So he's just put a pin in that. We'll talk about Chris Paul plenty. Josh Okogie, Torrey Craig, Bismack Biyombo, Jock Landale. Campaign has a non-guarantee, partial guarantee. I think 2.5 of his 6.5 is guaranteed. No real extension eligible candidates. Their cap situation and spending options are very fluid. It depends on what happens with Chris Paul, if they waive him, how they waive him, if they trade him, all kinds of stuff there. There's the DeAndre Ayton trade potential, I think, that we should probably discuss as well, that could affect what their options are. If they do bring everybody back, they're a second apron team, most likely, because that would involve guaranteeing all of Chris Paul's 30.8, and you'd have Ayton's 32.5 on there. There are ways to unlock the mid-level depending on how they handle Chris Paul. The mini mid-level may be there too, depending on how they waive him. I think there are ways. You've got a trade exception for Dario Saric for $5 million. I'm trying to think what else, sort of asset wise and table setting wise, to hit here. I think they can get, if you waive Paul, Payne, and Ish Wainwright, who's I think has a team option, so you not waive him, but basically get rid of him. That's another way to get the full MLE. I think it would be super close, but yeah. So what do they need? Depth. They have, that crushed them in the playoffs. Durant and Booker just couldn't play 50 minutes a night, it turns out, and be effective. Wing defenders. This is a team that you could sort of pick and choose almost anything in terms of like what they need to fill out the roster beyond their top 4 guys, or maybe top 2, depending on what they do with their 3rd and 4th best players. So can you, if you can't, we can work collaboratively on this. Take us through the Chris Paul sort of options. Like what could this look like for the Suns with respect to waiving him, waiving and stretching, trading? Like what's our sort of choose your own adventure set of options here?
So I think if you waive CP3, which is just you're paying him the 15.8 million and you're taking that dead cap hit, you're not stretching it, you can open up the mini MLE. And some people have speculated that if you do that, you could then use it on CP3 to bring him back at the lower number. And it's like, well, then you've kind of scuttled your best spending tool on keeping the same player just to save
like
money.
10 million.
Right. In general, I can't see them going that route. I just don't see what the sense would be behind it. You also mentioned that you could waive him, get rid of Campaign, get rid of Ish Wainwright, and you might be able to open up the bigger MLE. And at that point, it's like, well, what are we doing? You're taking out 2 rotation players. If you're going to get rid of him and it's not happening via trade, I believe waiving and stretching him, because you can stretch him over 5 years. I got this wrong on the podcast because I forgot he had that second non-guaranteed year. You can get the biannual and then the full mid-level. And so if you think, and this will step on the toes of, we probably won't even need to do like formal free agent targets for this team because they'll be talked about in this scenario. But if that gets you Bruce Brown and then someone you use your biannual on, do you think that's worth it to give up CP3? And I don't know, man.
Because you're weighing that. Sorry to cut you off. You're weighing that against trade, what you might get in trade for Chris Paul. It's that's another avenue you could extract assets from him.
I would say though, the problem is that because they don't have any other assets to attach to Chris Paul, that $30.8 million number is. We talked about the Clippers as maybe a team that would be open to it. Who are the teams that would be open to it? And a lot of those teams, who are the teams that are, 1, open to paying him the full boat, and then 2, they're sending you back 2 or 3 players to do it, rather than just this one lump sum contract that you're going to have less of an interest in. And it's just like, if Kyrie left Dallas, would they do Tim Hardaway Jr. and Maxi Kleber for Chris Paul? And I don't know that they would. They might want Davis Bertans in there instead. And if I'm Phoenix, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Chris Paul's still, the way I look at it is, Chris Paul is so important. It's still good. And I think important to what the Suns can do, but they are so top heavy with their salaries that they have to explore breaking him and DeAndre Ayton up into these smaller contracts. It's just so complicated because I think you look at DeAndre Ayton, who's owed 3 years and $100+ million. He's going to be the better asset, I think, because he's younger.
Yeah.
But like Chris Paul is by far, like, isn't he the more valuable player right now? Maybe not by far, but like DeAndre Ayton's season was that upside fucking down.
I think the what gives Paul the edge is that you would not have a real hard time finding a center like that's 80% as productive as Ayton is for $5 million.
Great point.
You could not find a player that is 80% as good as Chris Paul for $5 million. Like it's just the demands of the position and the scarcity of the type of talent that Chris Paul is. Like, it sounds crazy. People may disagree, but I am with you. I think Chris Paul is the guy that, has just more value right now. Now you start talking about like, he does have another, I forget what the particulars are on his 24-25. I think is it fully non-guaranteed?
Yeah, it's fully.
Yeah, that's kind of intriguing. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I jumped in there. Yeah. So let me ask you though, because this is on the same topic. If you could split Paul or Ayton into like 2.5 rotation players, which one makes more sense to go that route with?
I think it's Ayton.
I think you're right.
Just because maybe I'm just weighing too much. I think that you can trade Ayton on his own and maybe get more.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Paul, I just don't see I could see teams being interested in Paul, but like even let's use if the Heat want him as an example, they're going to try and send you, I guess, Duncan Robinson and Victor Oladipo. Does that count as breaking it up enough? Or are they going to try and send you Kyle Lowry, in which case that's just a one lump sum player?
Mm-hmm.
The Clippers, I guess, we talked about it between Rocco and I don't think they would give up Batum, but having Marcus Morris, that would be super awkward seeing him back in Phoenix anyway. So do you rule him out? Eric Gordon's salary, of course.
Powell.
I do you think it's 8-2?
So it's, as I'm thinking about it more, it's like I think Paul is more valuable to the Clippers. I mean to the Suns, but Ayton would have more value on the market. So it's like, you know what I mean? Those two ideas are like very much opposed to each other. So I think Ayton would be more likely to get you the pieces that you would want, which is also the reason you should trade him instead of Paul, because I think Paul just matters more to the Suns, like, because of the role that he plays and all the stuff I mentioned before. So I think you move Ayton. If you got to move one, I think Ayton is your first choice. Plus, you still, you don't want to overlook the fact that you have all these other options for dealing with Paul and his contract and stuff that doesn't involve a trade.
I'm just trying to think though of like the DeAndre Ayton trade market itself. We've already established that the Pacers wouldn't trade Turner straight up for him. Would the Spurs trade Keldon Johnson for DeAndre Ayton?
Ooh. Well, is Wembanyama the 4? I guess maybe. I mean, I don't know. Keldon Johnson's deal is so much better, but Ayton's probably a better player than Keldon Johnson, I think, or at least the best version of Ayton, I think, is better. And I'm gonna need. You know what? I might need more than just Keldon Johnson if I'm the Suns, and I don't know if the Spurs would be willing to do that.
I mean, it could be Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins could be like the deal.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. I kind of like that for the Suns a little bit.
I thought about like Dallas with number 10, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then it's Davis Bertans or Maxi Kleber. I think you would fight like hell to make it not Maxi Kleber, but I don't know if the Suns are going to want Davis Bertans.
No. Yeah, let's see. Where can you move Ayton? Are there any of the cap space teams that you could that
Utah is not going to want him. Indy, again, they have Miles Turner there already. Detroit has enough bigs, I think. Never know with them. Houston,
they got Sengun. I mean, they're not.
Yeah, Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. Yeah,
because I wouldn't mind someone like Jayshawn Tate and like and/or Tari Eason on the Suns. That would be fun. Like, why are you acquiring DeAndre Ayton when you have Sengun and you're probably going to in a center too?
We know Brooklyn's not interested in him because he didn't even come up in like the Kevin Durant trade. And they have Nick Claxton.
It's tough. I don't know but would you agree that what percentage odds would you put on Ayton being traded this offseason?
Oh man, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like he's not going to be traded because it involves selling too low on him. And Vogel came in and was already kind of talking about how excited he is to coach him. And there is a higher end outcome where it's maybe you reboot his value and then move. Like we've seen him be the co-anchor of a defense that reached the NBA Finals not too long ago.
Yep.
And is this someone who just got paid and was satisfied and then slipped off as the year went on this season? Oh, he had like some higher peaks in the middle and then sort of fell off. I think he's young enough to where you can hope that he'll rebound. I don't think he's going to get traded. What about you?
I would have felt better about saying over 50% before we just went through like a third of the league and said no, 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 no. So yeah, I think I agree. I still think he's the guy you should try to trade because in theory he has more value than Paul, I guess, but I'm sort of feeling like I need to walk that back. Like I just don't see where the clear trade is.
I think there's a better like you're not trading Chris Paul and getting Keldon Johnson would be like there's maybe a chance that you could trade DeAndre Ayton and you get a package of like number 10 Tim Hart. You're not getting that package for Chris Paul.
Would you trade Ayton to the Wizards for Porzingis?
Well, then so you're just saying okay, we value Porzingis's floor spacing, rim protection, health be down because the number is going to be the same. Like KP's technically making more than him when you look at his player option.
Yeah,
would I do it?
What's that? I don't know.
I feel like that'd be a fun trade. I feel just like, man, you talk about a frail front line looking like, look how skinny, like, string beanie that KP and Kevin Durant would be. Would you do that deal?
I don't know. I doubt it because the injury history with Porzingis, and this is like assuming he probably is just opting in, and then you have his free agency coming up, so you're just getting off money potentially if you don't keep him. You do have to keep Ish Wainwright on the roster if you have Durant and Porzingis as your 4-5 because you just need to just have a larger average body width on the team, and Wainwright would take care of that because he's the widest human in the NBA.
So we think DeAndre Ayton's back in Phoenix next year to start, at least.
I guess.
Do you think Chris Paul is?
That's such a hard question. Do I think Chris Paul is back?
Or is there a scenario? Like I'm trying to think of who they could even get for the biannual, but like if you signed, let's just say is Bruce Brown and man, oh God, this is so tough. Is Bruce Brown and I'm trying to be like fairly ambitious. Bruce Brown plus who is worth waiving and stretching Chris Paul?
And the who has to be biannual exception guy, basically.
I'm assuming Bruce Brown's got to be the mid-level guy, right?
Oh yeah. You're not getting Bruce Brown for the biannual. I mean, probably not.
Let's say okay, Bruce Brown and Dennis Schroeder is like the end outcome. And that's like, I don't even think Suns fans would want Dennis Schroeder on a team that has campaign, but like that might be, he might get more than the biannual. So I'm just trying to map out the scenario where it makes sense to waive and stretch Chris Paul to where you're getting enough back. And like, this made a bunch of sense.
Yeah. The only way it makes sense, and we just talked about how you basically cannot do this, is if you waived and stretched him and somehow got off of Ayton's contract for nothing. For like picks or something, because then you have way more flexibility. You'll have the full mid level. You'll have, cap space that I can't calculate because I just made this up right now. But that's not going to happen. So yeah, I guess he's on the team, right? I guess maybe it's at a reduced salary. Maybe they do the weird, I don't, but if they stretch him though, they can't re-sign him.
It's like, or what about Bruce Brown and Josh Richardson? Is that enough to be like, hey, we waived and stretched Chris Paul, and that made sense? Probably not, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so. So that means then that the way forward is all four of the main principles are back, and you're just hoping to hit on minimums. Is that where we are?
And well, because can they access the mini MLE as currently constructed? I've been considering their cap scenarios in my head, and sheets are all over the place, but it'd be tight. But if they bring back Chris Paul,
no way. They're at 171.
Yeah, but that's if you keep campaign, which they probably will. So they could maybe use they could use it. It would be tight, but they have to stay under 179.5. It'd be tight.
Yeah, you know what? They could use it.
They'd have to fill out the rest of the roster with minimums, but like, and look, that gets a little bit weird because they kind of need Bismack Biyombo, and do they want to bring back a TJ Warren or whatever? But like, if they could get a Josh Richardson for the mini MLE, I would do it. Like, I would just, we'll figure it out.
I think he's worth the mini MLE, and then Schroeder, I think we both agree, might. I mean, he's probably getting more than that.
You don't need him.
Right.
You don't need him.
Right. You've got, and in this scenario, you have Payne back, I think, too, because if you cut him loose, you're still paying $2 million of his 6.5. So it's like, I don't know.
And if you're looking like back in the minimums for this team, like what does Yuta Watanabe go for this offseason? Javonte Green coming off the knee injury, that's a pretty valuable player. And you could talk like Josh Okogie, get him back, Damian Lee, like, or would those guys come back? But man, it gets so tough. I don't need, like, I would think Watanabe's earned more than a minimum.
I mean, you never probably, but like that would be if you could get him for the minimum, you would feel pretty darn good about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think so.
Would you Jay Crowder for the mini MLE, or is it no?
I wouldn't. I would. Crowder seems like a minimum guy now, right? Like if he's lucky at this point, don't you think?
Really?
You think you think Jay Crowder's a mini MLE? Like 7? You pay him 7 a year?
I would just be shocked if he went for, like, he has to be at least a biannual guy or something, right?
I don't know. He just didn't play, and then I feel like I think the way he handled the Phoenix exit is like there'd be some percentage of executives that are just we're out of the Jay Crowder business.
Look, the mini MLE contracts are so short term now, like the max of 2 years, that it's just like I think he gets it.
Let's keep track of this. Over under 7 million, over under full mini MLE for Jay Crowder. I'm saying under. You could say over.
All right, I'll note that.
I did have Josh Richardson as a mini MLE candidate for the Suns, if they're able to use it. Strus is another guy that I wouldn't mind there. But I think Strus probably is going to price himself out of that.
I guess if you get Strus while stretching and waving Chris Paul, but
yeah. The Suns are going to. So of the team, well, there are a lot of teams that are going to have interesting off seasons in this conference. We still have one left, but the Suns are right up there, considering they've already like cannonballed into the news cycle in early June. It's pretty amazing.
They would. I don't think they're going to decline his team option, and this is a deep cut. But Lindy Waters, the third, would be interesting in Phoenix as just sort of this motion shooter who might be better than Landry Shamet at this point. So is that a minimum guy though? I don't think OKC's declining his team option, but I had him circled for a couple teams that needed shooting. Seth Curry's not a minimum guy, right? And they also, I feel like they need a little bit more size.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like, I'm just looking down here. Like like the Cavs, I was looking at Lamar Stevens just as like a replacement for an Okogie type or Wainwright type. But I mean, the Cavs have a $1.9 million team option. They'll just
take a flyer on Thaddeus Young after the Raptors presumably waive him.
Yeah, that's one that makes sense because you just bring in a veteran that could maybe give you some minutes at the 5 behind Ayton if you don't manage to bring back the Landale and the Biyombo, the Landale Biyombo 1-2 punch that people will remember for years.
So and it makes it so tough. We don't know their spending range. I think they're going to end up like, I think they're just going to end up using in the mini MLE, or and anything they do, it'll happen via trade. Like Chris Paul is back unless he's moved via trade, because I just don't see the scenario. You come off super cheap if it ends up being, to me, waiving and stretching Chris Paul to use the biannual in the mid-level. Okay, great. I just don't know that the sum of those acquisitions are going to be as valuable as Chris Paul.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've had a lot of those scenarios so far it's just not worth it to do this with player X because you can't, recoup that value with other guys.